and welcome to Formula Facts. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jack Lake, and I'm joined here with
Destinee.
Destinee. Another good weekend to break down in Imola, and I think something that really was the most interesting about Imola was the qualifying. So let's get into qualifying right off the bat as we do our race recap. What did you see from qualifying? What did you think was the most important things that you saw?
I think the big takeaway from quali was Yuki Tsunoda's crash. He crashed way too early in the qualifying session. We were all surprised he walked away from it. Thank God for the halo. And he looked pretty shaken up, and he did a lot of damage to the Red Bull. So Red Bull is not a fan of their cars getting that torn up. So that was my first impression of quali.
Yeah, thank God for the halo. That was something really interesting as we saw at Yuki, because I think I saw some pictures and they talked about that car, and Red Bull had to fully remake that car. Like, maybe they did something right? Because he went all the way from 20 to 10, so that's pretty impressive. I think another big storyline that you could take away was Aston Martin, and it wasn't just one Aston Martin driver. It was both of them, right, qualifying in the top 10 with Fernando Alonso in P5 and Lance Stroll in P8.
I know Lance Stroll woke up on the right side of the bed that morning. Like, that was impressive.
Yeah, it is something pretty interesting to look at. I always keep on looking at like the standings for the drivers. It always amazes me how he has more points than Fernando. Obviously, they really didn't have a very lucky race. We saw Alonso was very frustrated when he was talking to his engineers. Obviously, it really didn't work out for him. He ended up finishing in P11.
Another big takeaway from quali is Ferrari. Neither Ferrari got into Q3. And that's at Imola. That's at an Italian race. It was a big deal that neither car got in. Both of them were complaining about brakes the whole weekend. It seems like they're both really struggling, but that was a big surprise.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that was, really important, I guess, for Lewis. For someone who's been struggling, right, so far in the beginning, going to like this home crowd, right, at Imola, and we could see like every time they panned over to the fans, they were all wearing red, they're all wearing Ferrari. But it definitely was important. I guess we'll get into it later when you look at the final standings of the race, and we see that Lewis kind of picked it up, which is great. But definitely a low moment for Leclerc and Hamilton qualifying so low. And you wonder, like, how does that happen, right?
I know, especially in front of the Tifosi, who are a relentless group of F1 fans, right? So it was very disappointing. It was rough to hear on quali day. It was tough.
Yeah, for sure. And then another thing you look at after qualifying, another good qualifying out of Williams, double in the top 10, but Carlos Sainz in P6 and Alex Albon in P7. I think the Williams have just been really impressive so far this year. Something that no one would have expected. I guess we thought they were going to do better, but who would have thought they were going to do so well?
Especially running what is essentially last year's chassis. Like, they were very clear they did not make a whole lot of changes and that they're dedicating all of their resources to the 2026 car. And, look at that. Like, it's kind of, I think, one of those times my mom always used to say to me, like, desperation looks good on no one, right? Maybe you're too deep in it and you're too far in the weeds. And when you pull out and you kind of relax and you don't care as much, then you perform better. Maybe that's what's happening with Williams.
It really is something amazing. And we've all seen that clip from James Vowles talking about, like, we really don't care about this season. We don't care about we're really worried about 2026, like you said. And it's just like you said, it's amazing. Maybe it's kind of the lack of pressure that we're seeing out of Williams. I know there's definitely a lot of pressure when you look at Carlos Sainz, someone that raced amazing in the past couple of years between Ferrari and McLaren. But he was really coming into this Williams team expecting, I think, to be the number one driver. And Alex Albon has, really become a star again. And I think we did see a lot of talent out of him when he was in Red Bull. But obviously, no one can say in that Red Bull seat when they're next to Max Verstappen. He went around and then he got pushed around a couple different teams. He was struggling. But now that I think he has one of these cars that can compete in the top 10, it's really impressive to start watching him race.
I mean, I think I saw a thing the other day that was like Carlos Sainz is still the last Ferrari driver to win a race.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's about to be the first Williams to win a race.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And it's funny to watch. I think you've been seeing recently, or maybe you've always seen it with Alex Albon, and maybe I just don't remember it. He's been frustrated. Like recently, he was talking to what are we doing, guys? Like, he's always yelling. I would see a little bit of him and like Leclerc both yelling at their in the radios a lot. But I think it shows that there's still a lot of fight in these drivers, and you might have counted out Albon, but I think he's trying to show that he's still there, right? He's still one of these top drivers, still wants to be competing for a championship. And I think it's really impressive. So it was really one of these interesting qualifyings where you saw these lower drivers between Aston Martin. You saw Isaac Hadjar again, P9, another good qualifying. He's just really impressive. We can talk about him a different day, but he's really impressive, I think. Pierre Gasly getting into P10. And then something else that we can look at, this was definitely a big race for Franco Colapinto coming back, taking over Jack Doohan's seat.
And damaging the car almost immediately.
Yeah.
Like, what did we say? We said this a couple weeks ago, like this guy is a liability. He's not any better than Jack Doohan. And what does he do immediately in quali? He crashes the car.
Yeah, I'd like to see Flavio Briatore's face on, like right when he saw that, because I think he asks for so much out of these drivers that just can't do it. Like I'm sure is a very talented driver. I'm sure is Carl Pinto, but I think he's asking more of them than they really can show. But it's definitely been a struggle in that Alpine car. I think they really just don't have the pace this year. Pierre Gasly I think he's trying to get a lot out of it, and I think he's done a good job at some points. But I think it just shows. He does a good job in qualifying sometimes, but when it gets to these longer races, it really shows the flaws that car has. So that's what I'm getting out of them recently.
Yeah. No, he occasionally does really well, Pierre Gasly, but it is not consistent.
He's like Lance Stroll. Every once in a while, he pulls off that like Ayrton Senna drive, and you're like, "Where'd that come from?" And then he goes back the next week, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's him." Something else that we can look at from qualifying was George Russell, getting a P3, which is pretty good for him, right? And then behind him was Lando Norris. So it's definitely a struggle for Lando Norris, I think, to get pace out of that car in qualifying.
I was fully prepared for the McLarens and Verstappen to take each other out and for George Russell to just win that race on pure luck and I still hold out that will happen sometime throughout the season where it'll just be a knife fight at the front and George will come whizzing by in true George fashion and win a race because entirely possible. Yeah,
I think I saw a video on that recently. It was like when George Russell is really like all tensed up and all like competing for stuff, it never works out well for him. But when he's just driving along and cruising, he always has like an amazing performance. And I think that's a good segue if you go from luck into the race. If we look at how the race went, Max Verstappen, I think I texted you right after I watched the race. It was just, we've seen Max be very unlucky this year when it comes to, the safety cars with the car. But I think this really like turned that around. We finally got lucky with the safety car right after Lando Norris went in and Max was struggling on when am I going to go in to change my tires. They got the virtual safety car. So he really lucked out with that, really helped the tires. It was a really impressive drive out of Max. And you go into luck, you can talk about it. That first, what was that, overtake right in turn one? That was amazing.
It was Oscar making a mistake and Max taking full advantage of it. And I think whenever it's really easy as Max Verstappen fans to get used to the wins, but it's moments like those that remind me like why I'm a Max Verstappen fan. And it is because this man is so precise and has thought of all of the options and he knows exactly what he's going to do in any given moment. He saw the opportunity and he took it and he won the race entirely because of it. And Oscar let his guard down for a millisecond and it cost him the race. Like that's just what battling Max for a driver's championship looks like.
Yeah, I think that's just something that just comes with with Max. Something that you see with these drivers is, they all have the talent, right? No one gets into Formula One. If you like everyone in Formula One, all 20 drivers have a lot of talent. But I think
Except Stroll.
Oh yeah, well that's a given. Yeah, I did 19 drivers, all of the talent. But I think the thing that separates them all is right. It comes down to the strategy. It comes down to the mental side of things. I think we see that with a lot of professional sports, but with Max Verstappen, it's just really something that has that champion qualities, right? That winning qualities. That even though he's in a struggling car, he's going to get everything he can get out of it. Right? He's going to go with be as strategic as he can. Now I'm going to ask you: do you think that he was planning to make that move? Because I think we saw after it happened, after the race, Christian Horner said that was like a win it or bust, right? Because if he didn't make the move, right, would have dropped way back. So, it was a big risk out of Max. Do you think he was looking for that off the start? I don't know.
Of course, 100%, without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's Max. It's Max, right? Like, he is unhappy anytime he is not in pole position. He is unwell anytime he's not winning a race. And his entire goal is to get in there and win races. And he was going to find a way in there. And I guarantee you he was planning. It might not have worked out exactly how he thought, but he knew he was going to get in there in turn one. And that's how it happened. And he made it happen.
I think that Red Bull car, it definitely does have some flaws, but that car is really impressive with Max in it once it gets in clean air. Once it's not trailing behind Oscar Piastri and all these other drivers, that car can really fly, down the straights. And it's just a pretty fast car because it's so built towards Max and his driving style.
Well, and that's an interesting concept because, like, in Miami, Max did have the clean air, but Oscar caught him. Yeah. Like, no amount of clean air. Those McLarens are fast. So, I mean, the safety cars definitely worked in Max's favor for this race. It did allow Oscar to catch up every now and then, but I think we saw the glimmer of Red Bull and what Red Bull is known for doing, especially with Max Verstappen in the lead of a race.
I think we've heard a lot of talks coming from Red Bull about these upgrades that they're going to be making over the coming weeks, and I'm really excited. I hope that was the start of them. If they can keep on improving that car and with Max in it, and I think Yuki's going to finally get settled in, I think we can start to see the comeback of Red Bull. That's what I'm going to start predicting.
Nice. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I'm not going to be pessimistic about that. My Red Bull.
It's too early in the season to call it, right? Max still has enough of Oscar's not that far ahead. We've got time.
That's for sure. We look at some other pretty impressive performances. Lewis Hamilton, right, we said he had a horrible qualifying. Both Ferraris did, and then the way that he came back after these struggles in qualifying to finish P4 is pretty impressive.
He did not get unlucky in a safety car situation, and that's why he was able to climb back. He definitely was back there battling Kimi Antonelli. I was like yelling during the race, like, no, Kimi, no, like, don't let him through. But it was an impressive drive for Lewis. He has a lot to prove. And the Tifosi were there and he wants to show out for them. So, he did very well. Charles did not.
I think it was important for Lewis to have that race. I think something we haven't seen out of Lewis. I know recently he's been going crazy with the engineers over the radio, but it was definitely rewarding for him to see at the end of the race. I think it was I'm not even a Lewis fan, but just to see at the end of that race, to see him talking to the engineers saying, great race, guys, good strategy today. That that's just kind of draws you back to what he used to be like in Mercedes. Every time he'd win, he'd be like, thank the guys in the factory. It just reminds me of like old Lewis. And if he can feel like he's starting to get back in that, obviously the Ferrari car is pretty impressive. So we can see what can happen with that. But Charles Leclerc, it was a struggle. He went the opposite, and he was back as always arguing with the engineers over team radio.
Yeah. I laughed out loud during his radio message, which I will not repeat because it has some curse words in it. Just that he keeps getting unlucky in safety cars, and he's the unluckiest driver. And that just really speaks to his mental state. And God help him because he's going into Monaco this week. So prayers for Charles.
I think one more final thing that we can talk about just before we get into Monaco was what happened with the Aston Martin cars. We said that they had a really impressive qualifying, going in 5 and then 8, and that's definitely not how it ended. We saw Fernando Alonso drop way back and finish in P11, and then Lance Stroll finished in P15. So, how does that happen, right?
Yeah, I have no idea. And Fernando's a really competitive driver. He has a lot of experience. He knows what he's doing. I'm not even going to mention Lance Stroll or what I even think's going on in his or Liam Lawson's head. But yeah, it's disappointing. I know that they're hanging a ton of hopes on Adrian Newey for the 2026 car. So maybe they're trying to pull Williams.
Yeah. Well, they're doing way different than Williams is this year. But you're right. I'm starting to wonder if it's, Alonso is a very competitive driver and he's had some great seasons, but he's getting older. But you wonder if it's getting to that point where if it is the car, if it's the driver. I think it's something that we're going to find out next year. Because we know that Aston Martin has been banking on this 2026 car. So once we see that car come out, once we see Alonso in it, if that car is as good as it is, then Alonso should definitely be performing in that car. Lance Stroll, who knows what he's going to do. But Alonso should be performing well in that 2026 car.
Yeah.
Let's get into Monaco.
Monaco.
So last year when they had the Monaco race, as all the races that we've kind of done so far this year, I really wasn't watching Formula One that much. So I'll let you take the lead on Monaco.
Monaco is known as the crown jewel of the F1 calendar. It's one of the most famous races, most historic races, the glitziest, the glamorous. Like when you think of F1, everyone thinks of the Monaco race. And they should. It's an amazing race, or it used to be an amazing race. Now the cars are too big. And so it's very difficult for these cars to be competitive in ways that we see on other tracks. So the important thing about Monaco is that you have to qualify well. Usually whoever takes pole is going to win the race. So last year we saw the first Monegasque driver since 1931, Charles Leclerc, finally won his home Grand Prix. It's the Le Curse of Leclerc. He finally won it. It was a big deal. I was very, very happy for him. And then he did his very iconic jump into the bay and then rode his bike home. So a very Charles Leclerc moment. But other things that happened last year, Sergio Perez had his very, very intense wreck on the first lap in Monaco, totaled his car. He wasn't the same driver since, but then they had to restart the race. So then everyone was very antsy about will Charles win because they had to restart the whole thing. Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly got into a fight, and then Esteban walked off the grid after he put his car in the pit lane, and it was very dramatic. And Max finished down the grid. I think he was 6th.
Yeah, I think he was 6th.
It's just impossible to pass at Monaco. I'm hoping next year the cars are supposed to be a little bit smaller, that it'll make for some more competitive driving. And this year they're implementing the mandatory 2-stop rule. They have to use at least 2 different types of tire compounds. So they're trying to make it more competitive. They're trying to do what they can to bring interest into the race, because this race is on the calendar for a very long time. So they have to keep people interested and keep people showing up.
Yeah, I think just like you said, just to go off what you said, it's just a really historic race. And I was saying to you before, when you look at this race, and you were saying to me, the most interesting thing to watch is qualifying, like you said. So I think this is going to be one of those races, and I hate to say it, that what you see out of qualifying is probably what you're going to see at the end of the result. But I think with the point, obviously there's a lot that goes into the decision to make a 2-stop. But I think one of the points they might have looked at is that maybe these pit stops can cause some moving around from qualifying. That's what I was saying to you, because otherwise you really don't see that many changes. I mean, this is the first time that I think we're really going to see these usually you see the top cars probably take one stop the whole time for all these races, but now it's going to come down to the strategy. I think this is really going to be a strategy race, and I think something that I usually do on race day is I usually, before I watch the race, I go on F1 and they usually have like a strategy guide for the tires, and it's always really cool to look at. Something that we've seen a lot out of this year is that Lewis Hamilton starts with the hard tires a lot.
He's doing well on a hard tire.
It's good because then he usually can do, he really goes, it's pretty impressive what they do. But, everybody usually goes to the mediums to start recently, but he's always, I guess he's usually lower down, so I guess he's trying to overcut, but he ends up with the hard tires, and I guess it works out for him.
Yeah.
Do we want to get right into our preview? Well, not our preview, to our predictions?
Yeah, let's do some predictions. All right, so here's what I'm manifesting is going to happen for the Monaco Grand Prix.
Okay. So wait, are you going to be optimistic or are you going to be realistic?
No, I'm not going to be realistic at all. It's Monaco. This is not supposed to be realistic because it's going to be the most boring race. Okay, so here's what I think. Charles Leclerc goes back to back.
Yep,
right? He's going to run it back. Charles is going to win Monaco 2 years in a row, back to back, after races and races of fighting with his engineers. It's going to all pull together at the end, and Charles is going to win. I think the only realistic thing I'm going to put on my podium is Oscar Piastri in second, because how could you not? And then I'm going to manifest another completely crazy wild card. Kimi Antonelli gets his first podium in F1, and it's at Monaco. The crowd goes wild.
Oh my gosh. This is going to be I wish we had standings on these predictions because I would totally be winning.
That's what I'm hoping for.
So what's your final? So let me hear the predictions. Who's 1, 2, 3 again?
1, Charles Leclerc. 2, Oscar Piastri. 3, Kimi Antonelli.
You're putting Oscar. So you picked you want to manifest and pick your optimistic one, and you put Oscar Piastri in your 2.
Yes. Listen, I put 2 crazy things out on the podium, and you got to anchor it in a little bit of reality. And so I'll take the hit with an Oscar Piastri if it means I get Charles and Kimi on the podium.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to put Red Bull back to back with another win. Max Verstappen is going to be my number 1. 2023, we saw he had a great race. I think if he pulls off a good qualifying, which he's been doing recently, I think he'll have a good Monaco. And hopefully Red Bull has the strategy that can figure this out with the whole 2-stop situation going on. I don't think I'm going to put a McLaren in my top 3. Only because I think Zach Brown is going to screw up every single strategic idea there. That's also why I'm not going to put the Ferrari in my top 3 either. So I think I'm going to put in my number 2 for fun. I think I'm going to pull a Destinee and do it for fun one for my 2 and 3. I'm going to do Kimi Antonelli, who had a bad race in Imola. I think he's going to come back. I think he's going to get a P2. And then in my P3, we're going to see Carlos Sainz, who last year finished in P3. I think he's going to finish in P3 again.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're both going to be optimistic.
Okay. We will see what happens.
These are going to go up on our stories, and we're going to get all those comments again. So we can't post this on TikTok because we always get the bad comments coming back at us.
Who cares? Haters going to hate. It's like Taylor Swift says.
So my number 1 is Max Verstappen going back to back. Number 2, I'm going to put Kimi Antonelli getting his first podium in F1. And then my number 3 spot, I'm going to put Carlos Sainz. Had a good race last year, and I think he's going to finish P3 again, this time in a Williams.
I'd be so thrilled if that happened.
That'd be awesome. So thank you, everybody, for watching Formula Facts. Another good episode. We got to review Imola and then do a little preview on Monaco. I don't think our predictions are going to become true, but maybe. So fingers crossed. But like we said, it's really going to depend on what happens in qualifying. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, look at our Instagram and our TikTok. Thanks for watching. I'm Jack Lake.
I'm Destinee Day.